September 1881, Blackwater, Colorado. They tied her to the auction post the way you'd tie a sick mule, wrists lashed high above her head, back pressed against rough-cut pine, feet sunk in the dust of the town square. The sign hanging from her neck did the rest of the cruelty. Defective mail, order bride, for sale, $1 only, no refund. Charlotte Hayes, 25, once a dressmaker from Boston, now the spectacle of Blackwater. The autumn air was thin and cold, but sweat ran down her spine under the too-tight traveling dress she had worn with such trembling hope just 3 days before. She remembered stepping down from the stagecoach, clutching her carpet-bag, searching the crowd for a man with a red cravat and gold watch chain. Harrison Whitmore, prosperous merchant, respectable widower, seeking a refined Eastern bride. Instead, he had thrown his head back and roared with laughter. That's what they sent me?" he'd shouted, voice echoing down the street. "I ordered a wife, not a hog for slaughter. Send it back." The word "it" had cut deeper than any knife. Men had snickered. Women had covered their mouths to hide their smirks. Children had pointed and stared as the sheriff led her away, promising Harrison the matter would be handled. Now, handling it meant this: 3 days of standing in the square like damaged goods, a $1 price tag swinging against her collarbone. Traces of dried mud still marked her skirt where boys had thrown clumps of dirt. A bruise darkened her forearm where a drunk had grabbed her and whispered things in her ear she couldn't bear to remember. Her shoulders ached, her ankles throbbed. Her brown eyes, once soft and hopeful, stared blankly ahead. "Look, Ma," a woman tittered to her daughter as they passed. "That's what happens to girls who eat too much and dream too high." A group of cowhands lounged by the hitching rail. "I ain't paying $1, one called. "Maybe I'd take her for a sack of feed. Might pull a plow." Laughter followed like stones. If you were standing there in Blackwater Square watching this, what would you do? Before we go on, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from right now? And be honest, do you think what they're doing to Charlotte is justice or pure cruelty? The crowd shifted as someone new stepped into the square, and the laughter died the way a fire dies under a bucket of water. He was massive, taller than any man in town, shoulders broad as a barn door, black hair falling in rough waves to his collar. A thick beard framed a scar that cut from his cheekbone to the corner of his mouth, as if someone had once tried to carve the smile off his face and failed. Marcus Thorne, the beast of the Rockies. The name moved through the crowd in a nervous whisper. Beside him walked a little girl of 7, all wild blonde hair and solemn blue eyes. She had the wary look of a child who'd seen too much and spoken too little. Charlotte barely noticed the man. It was the child who stopped in front of her, tilting her head as if studying a painting. For a long moment, Lily said nothing. Then, in a small, trembling voice that carried farther than any shout, she looked up at the giant at her side. "Daddy," she whispered, "buy that fat lady for $1, please. She looks just like Mommy." The square fell silent after Lily's plea. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Charlotte froze, stunned, not by the child's words, but by the softness in Lily's eyes, a softness she hadn't seen directed at her in years. Marcus Thorne looked down at his daughter, then up at Charlotte. His eyes were a glacial blue, unreadable, the kind of eyes that had watched storms tear mountains apart without blinking. Rumors wrapped around him the way fog wraps a forest. Murderer, lunatic, widower driven mad. People claimed he had killed his own wife in a drunken rage. Others swore he lived half wild among wolves. But now, as he looked at Charlotte, 400 pounds, exhausted, humiliated, her wrists rubbed raw from rope, his expression didn't show disgust. It showed something far more dangerous: recognition. Deputy Ford swaggered forward, twirling the key around his finger. "Well now, didn't think you of all folks would want a bride, beast." Marcus didn't glance at him. Instead, he removed a silver dollar from his coat and flicked it toward Ford. The coin struck the deputy's cheek before clattering to the dirt. "I'm not buying a bride," Marcus said, voice low as distant thunder. "I'm buying her freedom. Untie her." Ford's smile faltered. No one disobeyed Marcus Thorne. He cut the ropes with shaking hands. Charlotte stumbled forward, her legs buckling after 3 days of standing. She would have hit the ground if a pair of strong arms hadn't caught her. Marcus lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, draping his heavy bearskin cloak over her shoulders. Warmth, safety, 2 things she hadn't felt since leaving Boston. Lily reached up and took Charlotte's hand. "Mommy, I missed you," she whispered. Charlotte's heart squeezed. I'm not—" Marcus cut in sharply. "Lily!" The girl looked up instantly, fear flickering across her small face. Marcus knelt, placing a big, calloused hand gently against her cheek. "This woman isn't Mommy, but she's going to help us. You understand?" Lily swallowed hard, then nodded. Charlotte expected Marcus to drop her hand. Instead, he took Charlotte by the elbow and guided her toward his horse. "You're coming with me." Sir, I don't understand," Charlotte stammered. "Why? I'm not who your daughter thinks I am." He looked her over, really looked, at the flushed cheeks, the trembling hands, the sign still hanging from her neck. "You resemble my wife enough that Lily smiled for the first time in months." He ducked his head slightly, as if the next words cost him something. "I need someone to be her mother." Charlotte's breath caught. "You want me to pretend?" "For her sake," Marcus said, "not mine." He helped her mount the horse, lifting her with startling gentleness for a man his size. Then he placed Lily in her arms, swung up behind them, and rode out of Blackwater without looking back. The townspeople watched him disappear into the pines, their whispers fading behind him. The mountains swallowed them quickly, replacing civilization with the endless hush of spruce and fir. By dusk, they reached a clearing where a solid log cabin stood beside a narrow brook. Smoke curled from the chimney. A fenced-off garden lay to one side, and a small stable to the other. Marcus dismounted, lifted Lily down, then helped Charlotte off the horse. "This is home," he said simply. "You'll sleep in the main room with Lily. I sleep in the barn." Charlotte opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. "There are rules." He stepped closer, the firelight from the cabin door catching the scars along his cheek. "In front of Lily, you are her mother. You hold her. You comfort her. You read to her. You call me husband. If she asks why you changed, you tell her it was the long journey that made you weaker, nothing more." Charlotte's pulse quickened. The weight of what he was asking settled on her like new snow. "But when Lily sleeps," Marcus continued, "we are strangers. I don't want conversation. I don't want kindness. You do your work. You keep to your space. Once Lily is healed of this grief, you're free to go if that's what you choose." His voice softened, not warm, but weary. "I lost my wife, Miss Hayes, and Lily lost her mother. I'm asking you to help her pretend she hasn't lost everything." Charlotte looked down at Lily, who had wrapped her arms tightly around her middle as though afraid she'd disappear. Slowly, Charlotte nodded. "I'll do it. For her." Marcus stepped back. Something unreadable flickered in his icy gaze. "Good. We start at dawn." And just like that, Charlotte Hayes, once a $1 bride, became a ghost of a woman she had never met, living in a cabin with a child who believed she'd returned from the dead and a man who refused to feel anything at all. The mountains were nothing like Blackwater. They were colder, quieter, and far more honest. Snow dusted the treetops each morning, and mist clung to the riverbanks like a thin veil. The cabin itself sat tucked against a rise of granite, protected from the worst of the wind. Inside, it smelled of pine, leather, and wood smoke, a scent that slowly wrapped itself around Charlotte like a blanket of safety she didn't trust yet. Her first morning began before sunrise. Charlotte woke to the sound of small hands patting her face and a soft voice whispering, "Mama, wake up. Papa says breakfast time." She blinked the sleep away. Lily's little face hovered inches from hers, bright-eyed and expectant. Charlotte forced a smile. "I'm up, sweetheart." The words slipped out more naturally than she expected. She rose carefully, her body still sore from days of humiliation, hunger, and cold, and Lily clung to her side, guiding her toward the kitchen. Marcus was at the stove, frying bacon in a cast-iron pan. The sizzle filled the room. He glanced over his shoulder. "In front of Lily," he reminded her softly. "You say good morning like a wife would." Charlotte swallowed hard. "Good morning, dear." Marcus gave a stiff nod, nothing more. "Sit, eat." He set a plate before her, eggs, bacon, and warm cornbread. It was more food than she'd eaten in days. Lily climbed into her lap, insisting on sharing every bite, giggling with each piece Charlotte offered her. It was the first time the child had laughed freely since Charlotte arrived. "See, Papa?" Lily beamed. "Mama makes food taste better." Marcus's jaw tightened. The comment struck him somewhere deep. "Eat your breakfast, Lily." Charlotte caught the flicker of pain, the shadow of memory in his eyes. Emma again, the ghost who lived in every corner of this cabin. After breakfast, Charlotte followed Marcus outside. Frost clung to the grass. The sun had just begun to rise behind the peaks, painting the sky with strokes of pink and gold. "This way," Marcus said, leading her toward the creek. "You'll need water for cooking and cleaning. Creek's fresh cold even in summer." Charlotte knelt to fill the bucket, her breath catching at the shock of icy water numbing her fingers. Marcus watched her, not with judgment, but with a careful, quiet assessment. "You're strong," he muttered, "stronger than you look." The word startled her. She glanced up. "Thank you." He grunted as if irritated by the gratitude. The days settled into a rhythm. Lily stayed attached to Charlotte like a shadow, holding her skirt while Charlotte swept, sitting beside her while she stirred simmering stews, braiding her hair while she mended clothes by the fire. The child bloomed under the affection, becoming chattier, softer, less haunted. But the nights were another world. Once Lily fell asleep beside her, Marcus slipped outside without a word. He worked in the barn, chopped wood, or paced along the tree line with the restless energy of a man carrying wounds too heavy for daylight. A few times, Charlotte tried to speak to him after tucking Lily in. "Would you like tea?" "No." "I can help with that if you'd like." "I wouldn't. Thank you for letting me stay here." Don't thank me." Every conversation ended like a door slammed shut. Yet despite his coldness, Marcus was attentive in ways that didn't match his words. When she nearly tripped on the cabin steps, he caught her arm so fast she barely saw him move. When she struggled to lift a bucket of water, he took it from her with a quiet, "You'll hurt your back." When she brushed snow off the roof, he barked, "Don't, it's slick. I won't have Lily losing another mother." The last sentence hung in the air before either of them realized what he'd said. Marcus froze, fists clenching at his sides. Then he walked away before Charlotte could speak. It was the first crack in his walls. One windy afternoon, Charlotte found Lily sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Lily pointed toward the woods. "Papa's mad because I asked if Mama, that's other Mama, if she's watching us from heaven. He told me not to ask that any more." Charlotte sat beside her, pulling the girl into her arms. Lily leaned into her soft warmth instantly. "Your papa loves you very much," Charlotte whispered. "He just gets sad when he thinks about your mother." "Are you sad when you think about your old home?" Lily asked. "I used to think Mama was sad too, before she went away." Charlotte's throat tightened. She stroked Lily's hair. "Everyone gets sad sometimes, but being here with you makes me feel safe." Lily smiled at that, small but genuine. "I like when you call this home." Charlotte kissed the top of her head. "It's starting to feel like one." Behind them, the cabin door creaked. Marcus stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he watched the two most important people in his world wrapped around each other. He didn't interrupt. He didn't bark an order. He didn't remind Charlotte of the rules. He simply stood there, the cold mountain wind tugging at his coat, something raw flickering in his eyes. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Charlotte placed an extra log on the fire. Marcus sat across from her, carving a piece of wood with slow, deliberate strokes. "You're kind to her," he said at last, not looking up. "She deserves kindness," Charlotte replied softly. "Every child does." "She's smiling again," he said, "laughing. That's because of you." Charlotte hesitated. "I'm glad I can help." Marcus's hand stilled. His voice dropped, barely audible. "Don't get attached." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, a plea, a self-defensive instinct sharpened by years of grief. Charlotte folded her hands in her lap. Too late. Marcus finally looked up. For the first time, he didn't seem angry or cold. He seemed human, tired, haunted, uncertain, and deeply afraid of needing someone again. Before he could respond, a soft cry came from the bed. Lily was dreaming, trembling, whimpering, clutching at her blanket. Charlotte moved instantly, climbing into bed and pulling the child into her arms. "Shh! Mama's here," she whispered. "You're safe. I'm right here." Lily settled almost immediately, her small fingers gripping Charlotte's nightdress. Marcus watched from the firelight's glow, chest rising and falling unevenly. "You're good with her," he murmured. Charlotte didn't turn around. "I love her." Silence stretched long and deep. Then Marcus said the softest word she'd heard from him yet. "I know." Winter in the Rockies had a way of pressing itself into a person, into their bones, their breath, their thoughts. Most folks feared it, but strangely, Charlotte found herself growing steadier with each passing week, as if the quiet cold carved out space inside her where there had once only been fear and shame. The cabin helped. It wasn't much by frontier standards, one main room with a large hearth, a narrow loft for storage, a small adjoining room that had once been Emma's sewing space. But Marcus kept it warm, repaired, and stocked with wood, and Charlotte threw herself into transforming it with small touches, freshly washed curtains, herbs hanging from rafters, quilts she stitched in the evenings while Lily played on the rug. The cabin began to feel lived in, not just a shelter, a home. Each morning began the same way. Lily woke with the first rays of sun and shook Charlotte until she stirred. Charlotte's large, soft arms gathered the child automatically, holding her as if holding Lily was what she had been made for. Marcus would already be up, splitting wood outside or preparing a pot of coffee over the fire. "Morning," Charlotte said gently each day, falling into the role with ease. "Morning," he answered, usually without expression. But as the weeks passed, the tone shifted, subtle at first. One morning, Marcus set a mug of coffee before her without asking. Another morning, he said, "You slept a little later today. You needed it." And once, when she burned her hand on a pan, he crossed the cabin in 3 strides and caught her wrist, not roughly, not gruffly, but with a concern so startling she forgot the sting. "You all right?" Yes, just clumsy." "Don't say that, it happens." It was the gentlest thing he'd ever said to her. Charlotte found her place quickly in the rhythms of the household. She cooked meals, thick stews, warm breads, roasted meat Marcus brought home from hunts. She cleaned, fixed clothes, and taught Lily letters and numbers at the small table by the window. Lily, previously a quiet, ghost-like little thing, blossomed under Charlotte's steady affection. Her laughter became a constant melody drifting through the cabin. Marcus noticed. One evening after supper, as Lily sat on the rug drawing pictures in charcoal, Marcus watched her, arms crossed, leaning against the doorway. "She ain't drawn anything in nearly a year," he said quietly. "Stopped after Emma died. Too painful, I guess. But look at her now." Charlotte followed his gaze. Lily was drawing 3 figures standing in front of a cabin, one tall with a beard, another soft and round with a braid, and a little girl in between, holding both their hands. "She's drawing us," Charlotte murmured. "She is." A long silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire. Then Marcus said, "Thank you." Charlotte blinked, startled. For what? For giving her reason to smile again. Charlotte felt warmth bloom somewhere deep in her chest. But the softness of these moments was always balanced by Marcus's unspoken rules. When Lily wasn't present, he still retreated into himself, burying his grief under layers of silence. He ate quickly, spoke little, and spent hours outside doing tasks Charlotte suspected did not actually need doing. Still, small cracks had begun to form. One night, Charlotte woke to hear him tossing in the barn. She wrapped a shawl around herself and stepped outside into the sharp cold. Marcus sat with his head in his hands, shoulders trembling. "Marcus?" she whispered. He didn't look up. "I had the dream again," he said hoarsely. "The one where I find Emma too late." Charlotte approached slowly. "You don't have to go through that alone." Marcus stiffened. "You should be inside with Lily." "I'm here because I care," Charlotte said softly, "and because you saved my life." His head lifted. "I didn't save you. I bought you." Charlotte didn't flinch. "And then you saved me, every day since." Something unguarded flickered across his face. A man accustomed to holding his emotions behind stone walls found them suddenly, terrifyingly exposed. He stood abruptly. "Come inside. You'll freeze." He didn't touch her, but the way he hovered beside her, as if something might leap from the shadows and snatch her away, said more than any touch could. Days passed, and the cabin grew warmer, not from the fire, but from the shifting air between them. One afternoon, heavy clouds rolled over the mountains. Snow began falling thick and fast. As Charlotte gathered laundry from the line, she lost her footing on a patch of ice. Before she could hit the ground, strong arms caught her. Marcus. He held her a moment too long, breath warm against her cheek. When he realized it, he helped her upright and stepped back, as if burned. "Careful," he muttered, voice strained. "I would have been fine," she said, though her heart beat too fast. "No," he said quietly, "you wouldn't." That night, after Lily fell asleep curled against Charlotte's side, Marcus lingered by the fire. He watched them longer than usual, his eyes softening. Charlotte felt the weight of his gaze, warm and heavy, like a blanket she wished she could wrap around herself. Later, when she stepped out to fetch more firewood, she found the entire pile already restacked, organized, split evenly, perfectly prepared. Marcus's work. He was taking care of her in ways he refused to acknowledge aloud. She whispered to the snow-filled air, "Why won't you let yourself be close to me?" The next morning brought a rare surprise. Charlotte woke to the scent of something sweet. In the kitchen, she found Marcus standing awkwardly beside a plate of warm honey biscuits. "Lily said you like pastries," he said gruffly. Charlotte blinked at the gesture. "You baked these?" "I tried. They smell wonderful." "Don't lie," he muttered. "I'm not." She took a bite. They were dense, slightly burnt on the bottom, but delicious in their own way. "They're perfect," she said, and something true lit behind his eyes. The intimacy grew slowly, moments dripping like melted snow, gradually pooling into something warm. One evening, Lily fell asleep in Marcus's lap as he whittled wood. Charlotte approached to take the child, but Marcus shook his head. "She's fine," he murmured, but his gaze was on Charlotte, not Lily. Charlotte sat beside him. Their shoulders brushed, gently, accidentally, but neither pulled away. Marcus cleared his throat. "You're good with her." "I love her. I can see that." A quiet beat. Then Marcus added softer, "She loves you too." Charlotte swallowed. "Do you hate that?" "No," he said. "I'm just afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing someone again." Charlotte's breath hitched. "I'm not her. I'm not Emma. I'm me." Marcus turned toward her then, truly looking at her for the first time. The softness of her cheeks, the curve of her mouth, the quiet strength she carried like a shield. His voice was rough when he spoke. "I know." The room felt suddenly smaller, warmer. Charlotte's heart thudded loud enough she feared he could hear it. Marcus looked away first, clearing his throat. "You should get some rest," he muttered. But Charlotte knew something had changed. A door inside him, locked tight for 5 long years, had finally quietly begun to open. Spring thaw came slowly to the high Rockies. Snow melted from the pines in heavy drops, and the stream outside the cabin roared with new life. Inside the home Marcus once kept locked in silence, there was now laughter, movement, warmth, mostly because Charlotte breathed life into the space with every step she took. But the mountains had long memories, and so did people. It began with a knock at the cabin door. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where sunlight filtered through early fog. Charlotte was kneading dough while Lily practiced her writing at the table. Marcus had gone deeper into the woods to check his trap lines. The knock wasn't loud, but it was sharp, purposeful. Charlotte wiped her hands and opened the door, expecting to see Marcus returning early. Instead, two men stood outside. One was tall and narrow, with a vulture's posture and a greasy mustache. The other was squat and mean-looking, with a kind of expression that told the world he enjoyed hurting things smaller than him. The tall one tipped his hat. "Mornin', ma'am. You Charlotte Hayes?" Her stomach clenched. "Who's asking?" "The name's Deputy Roy Cawthor, ma'am. This here is my associate, Mr. Vance. We're from Blackwater." Blackwater, the town where she'd been tied to a post like livestock. The town where they'd auctioned her dignity for a single dollar. Every inch of Charlotte's skin went cold. "Blackwater sheriff is looking for you," Cawthor continued. "Seems there's some unsettled business. Legal matters." Charlotte forced herself to sound calm. "I left with no debts." Cawthor smiled without warmth. "Oh, you left all right, but you left behind a breach of contract." Her throat tightened. "What contract?" "The mail-order bride agreement between you and Mr. Harrison Whitmore." Ice flooded her veins. "It has no legal standing," she whispered. "A judge already—" Cawthor raised a hand. "Judge in Blackwater don't care about what a Denver clerk might have said. Mr. Whitmore filed charges, claims you were his property, says you ran out on him after he paid your transport." Charlotte's breath caught. "He humiliated me. He left me tied to a—" "Ma'am," Cawthor said sharply, "we ain't here to argue. We're here to take you back." Lily stood from the table, eyes wide. "Mama?" Cawthor looked down at her with a curl of disgust on his lip. "Well, ain't that sweet? She done found herself a brat." Vance shifted, resting a hand on his holster. "Where's the big man? The mountain freak?" Charlotte's heart hammered. "You need to leave." Cawthor stepped inside as if he owned the place. "We ain't going nowhere till we get what we came for." He reached for Charlotte's arm. She jerked back, but he grabbed her wrist anyway, fingers digging in. Lily screamed, and then the door slammed open. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway like a force of nature. Snow dusted his beard. His eyes, usually cold, usually guarded, burned with a fury Charlotte had never seen, not even on the day he bought her freedom. "Let her go," Cawthor smirked. "Mr. Thorne, we were just—" "You touch her again," Marcus said, stepping inside, "and I'll bury the both of you so deep the worms won't find your carcasses." Vance reached for his gun. He didn't get it halfway out of the holster before Marcus crossed the room, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him into the wall so hard the boards groaned. "Give me one reason," Marcus growled in Vance's face. "Just one, to let you walk out of this cabin alive." Cawthor swallowed hard. We're acting under legal authority." "You got no authority here," Marcus snapped. "You come onto my land. You lay hands on my wife. You threaten my child." He released Vance just long enough to shove him toward the door. "Get out!" Cawthor raised both hands. "Now look, Thorne, we don't want no trouble." "Then you shouldn't have come here." Marcus's voice dropped to something deadly. "You tell Whitmore if he comes within 10 miles of this mountain, I'll skin him alive." Charlotte had never seen Marcus like this. Shoulders squared, jaw tight, chest heaving. He wasn't the beast people whispered about. He was something much, much more terrifying. Cawthor and Vance scrambled out, nearly tripping over each other in the snow. They mounted their horses in frantic silence. Vance spat on the ground. "This ain't over, Thorne. Sheriff'll come next time." "And I'll be waiting," Marcus said. They rode off without another word. Inside the cabin, silence thundered. Charlotte leaned on the table, shaking. Lily flew into Marcus's arms, crying. Marcus held her close, dropping to his knees. "It's all right, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "Papa's here. I got you." Charlotte watched them, chest tight. They can't take me back, can they?" Marcus looked up, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked afraid. "They'll try," he said quietly. "Whitmore's a rich man. Men like him don't like losing. He'll throw every dollar he has at dragging you back." Charlotte's voice broke. "Marcus, I can't go back there." "You won't." He rose and moved toward her, slow, careful. "I swear on Emma's grave I won't let that happen." She shook her head. "You can't fight a whole town. I've fought worse. It's not just about fighting." Charlotte's breath trembled. "It's the law." Marcus squeezed her shoulders gently. "Then we'll make our own law." She blinked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "we go to a place where men like Whitmore have no sway. A place only mountain folk know. A valley high up where Lily'll be safe, where you'll be safe." She stared at him. "Leave here? I built this place for Emma. I can build us another." Charlotte's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something deeper, something like belonging. "Marcus, would we be alone?" "Just us three," he said. "A real family." Her breath hitched. "But am I truly part of that? Or just someone you're protecting?" Marcus looked at her then, not with obligation, not with forced duty, but with raw honesty. "You're part of us," he said. "Not because Lily needs you, because I need you." The word struck her like a physical touch, but before she could speak, another sound cut through the cabin. Hooves, many hooves. Charlotte's face went pale. "They came back already?" Marcus strode to the window. His shoulders stiffened instantly. "No," he said. "This ain't Whitmore's men." "Then who?" He turned toward her slowly, eyes darkening. "Trouble," he said. "A different kind." Outside, 7 armed riders were approaching the cabin, men Marcus clearly recognized, and none of them were smiling. The 7 riders came in a slow, deliberate formation, too disciplined to be drunks, too confident to be simple travelers. Their horses were dust-covered and muscular, the kind used by men who lived long weeks on the trail. Charlotte recognized one thing immediately. These were not lawmen. These were not townsfolk. These were predators. Marcus's posture changed the instant he recognized the lead rider. His body went stone still, jaw clenched, fingers flexing near the hunting knife on his belt. Lily sensed the tension instantly. She pressed herself against Charlotte's skirt. "Mama, who are they?" Charlotte knelt and stroked her hair. "Stay close to me, sweetheart." Outside, the riders fanned out, forming a semicircle around the cabin yard. The man in the middle, a tall, sandy-haired figure with a scar slicing down his left cheek, dismounted with the casual air of a man who believed nothing in the world could harm him. "Marcus Thorne," he said, voice carrying across the snow-dusted clearing. "Been a long time." Marcus stepped out onto the porch, his shoulders filling the doorway behind him. "Elias Kane." Charlotte recognized the name. Lily had muttered it in her sleep during nightmares. Marcus had spoken it once sharply, before refusing to explain. Elias smiled, a wolfish, cruel curl. "You look good, Marcus. Cabin suits you. Woman, kid, real domesticated." Marcus didn't react. "What do you want?" "Oh, come now," Elias said. "A man can't visit an old friend. We were never friends." The other men chuckled under their breath. Elias spread his arms, theatrically offended. "You wound me. After all the years we rode together, hunted together, survived that winter in Bitterhorn Pass, I thought we shared a bond." "You broke that bond," Marcus growled. Elias's grin widened. "Ah, yes, Emma." Charlotte froze. Lily grabbed her hand. Marcus's voice turned lethal. "Don't say her name." But Elias enjoyed provoking pain. "You should have come with me, Marcus. I told you that woman was dead weight. Slowed us down, cost us profits. I told you to choose the mountains, not the life of a woman too soft for the West." Marcus was shaking with fury. Elias leaned casually against a porch post. "If you'd left her behind like I said, maybe that bear wouldn't have killed her. Maybe you'd still be my partner. But no, you chose love, and look where it got you." The silence afterward felt like a physical wound. Charlotte stepped forward, unable to stay silent. "He lost the woman he loved. How dare you use that to taunt him?" Elias's head snapped toward her. He took her in. The generous curve of her frame, the softness of her face, the fear she tried to hide. "Well," Elias laughed, "you sure got a type, Marcus." Marcus moved faster than thought. He stepped off the porch and grabbed Elias by the shirt front, slamming him into the nearest tree with enough force to shake snow loose from the branches. "You insult her again," Marcus growled low, "and I'll gut you where you stand." Elias didn't flinch. He smirked. "Ah, so she's more than a warm body. Good to know." Marcus shoved him back and stepped between him and the cabin. "Why are you here?" Elias brushed snow from his coat. "Business. Simple as that. A man named Harrison Whitmore rode into our camp 2 days ago. Said you stole something of his." Charlotte's heart stopped. Elias continued, "A mail-order bride, if you can believe it. A big girl from Boston. Poor soul paid her way west, only for you to swoop in and steal her. He wants her back." Marcus didn't move. "She's my wife." Elias barked a laugh. "Since when do you care about legalities?" "It's not about the law." Marcus's voice was steady now, dangerous. "She belongs with me, and with Lily." "Your kid?" Elias tilted his head. "She called this woman Mama. Real touching. Almost makes me feel something." Then his voice hardened. "Whitmore paid us to collect the girl, alive if possible, dead if necessary." Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. Lily started crying. "Papa!" Marcus turned, his voice suddenly soft, despite everything. "Go inside, both of you." Charlotte shook her head. "We're not leaving you." "Charlotte," Marcus said, eyes burning, "you're my family, and I protect my family. Go." Elias snapped his fingers, and his men shifted, hands moving toward rifles and pistols. Marcus turned back to them, jaw set like bedrock. "You want her?" he said. "You'll have to kill me first." Elias grinned. That was the plan. He drew his gun, but Marcus was already moving. He lunged, slamming into Elias with the full weight of a man who had survived 5 years of grief and regret and was done running from all of it. Gunshots cracked through the clearing, snow burst into powder, horses reared, Lily screamed. Charlotte grabbed her, pulling her to the ground behind the porch steps, shielding her with her own body. "Papa!" Lily sobbed. Charlotte held her tight, breath shaking. "He's going to be okay. He has to be." But in her heart, she wasn't sure. Outside, men yelled. Marcus roared, and the snow-streaked ground turned into a battlefield between a mountain man defending everything he'd ever loved and the past that refused to stay buried. The gunfire faded first, then the shouting, then the heavy thud of a man's body hitting the snow. Silence settled across the clearing in a slow, terrible wave, broken only by the wind dragging through the pines. Charlotte held Lily so tightly the child could barely breathe, but neither of them dared move. They stayed behind the porch steps until a low groan sounded just a few yards away. "Charlotte!" "Marcus!" Charlotte scrambled up, pulling Lily with her. Her legs nearly buckled when she saw the mess around the cabin. 2 horses running loose, snow churned into red, muddied patches, one man groaning where Marcus had knocked him cold, another sprawled motionless. And Marcus stood in the center of it all, chest heaving, blood streaking his jaw and coat. He was alive, but barely. Elias Kane lay face down in the snow, unmoving. Marcus had disarmed him, broken his wrist, and ended the fight the only way a man like Elias understood. But Marcus's strength was fading now. His knees dipped, his hand clutched his side. Charlotte ran to him. "Marcus, Marcus, stay with me." He sagged into her arms, breath warm against her neck. "You stayed," he murmured. "Should have gone inside. Told you to go." She cupped his face, forcing his gaze to meet hers. "I'm not leaving you. Not ever again." Something broke in his expression then, not pain, not exhaustion, but the last remnants of the walls he had built around his heart. He leaned his forehead against hers, trembling. Lily threw her arms around them both, crying so hard her whole body shook. "Papa, don't go away. I already lost one mama. I don't want to lose you, too." Marcus wrapped his good arm around his daughter, pulling her in. "I'm right here, little bird," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Charlotte looked toward the fallen men. "What about them?" "Sheriff in Blackwater will handle it," Marcus said, voice low but steady. "They came to take what wasn't theirs, and they paid the price." Charlotte nodded. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the violence Marcus carried. She understood it now. He wasn't a beast. He was a man who fought like one only when the world threatened the people he loved. She led him inside the cabin, helped him sit by the fire, and cleaned the blood from his face. Every small touch, wringing a cloth, checking his ribs, brushing back his hair, was an act of devotion she no longer tried to hide. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than a winter dusk. "Charlotte, I don't want you here because Lily needs a mother. I want you here because I need you. Because when I thought I might lose you today, something in me broke." She met his gaze, her hand resting atop his on the blanket. "Marcus, this is my home. If you'll have me, I'm staying." He closed his eyes, exhaling a shuddering breath. "You're safe here, both of you, and if you want this to be your home—" He opened his eyes again, and there was no hesitation left. "Then it is, for as long as you'll have me." Charlotte leaned forward and kissed him, gentle and sure. Lily climbed into Marcus's lap and wrapped her arms around them both, and the three of them sat before the fire, bruised, exhausted, but finally undeniably whole. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the light from the cabin window shone warm against the dark woods, as strong and steady as the new family being formed within its walls. Stories like this remind us how fragile people can be and how powerful love becomes when it finally finds a place to rest. Charlotte was thrown away for a single dollar. Marcus was feared as a beast because grief had carved him hollow. Yet, in the frozen quiet of a mountain cabin, 2 broken souls found a reason to exist again. If you're listening right now, tell me, where in the world are you hearing this story tonight? Which city? Which country? Your comments mean more than you know. And if you still believe in love that heals the forgotten, stay close. The next tale is already waiting for you. You'll work off your debt in my bed, Mountain Man told the obese girl, but he meant something beautiful. You'll work off your debt in my bed. The words dropped into the silence like a hammer. Prue Ashworth flinched so hard the chair beneath her groaned in protest, the wooden arms biting into her soft sides. At 280 pounds, squeezed into a black morning dress that was already too tight, she felt every cruel inch of her body under Hezekiah Ironstone's gaze. Outside the frosted window of the Silverton Bank, townspeople shuffled past in the snow, their breath ghosting in the icy air. Inside, the fire crackled, the polished oak gleamed, and Prue's world was collapsing. Hezekiah Zeke Ironstone didn't look like any banker she'd ever seen. He looked like a mountain that had been forced into a suit. 6'8", shoulders so broad they strained the seams of his black vest, hands like shovels resting on the desk. His steel-gray eyes studied her without a flicker, framed by a face carved in hard planes and old scars. Dark hair streaked with silver, brushing his collar. $2,000, he said, voice low and even, as if he hadn't just shattered what little dignity she had left. That's the amount your father owed me when he died. As his heir, the debt is now yours. Her tongue felt thick, clumsy. I have the house, sir. It might be worth 300. I can sell my mother's piano and the silver. A house worth 300 doesn't touch 2,000, he cut in, and you'd still be homeless. The word homeless hung in the air like a death sentence. Prue's fingers dug into the fabric of her dress to stop their trembling. She could feel the familiar sting of shame burning up her neck. The same shame she'd felt since childhood, when boys mooed behind her in the street, when shopgirls smirked as she tried on dresses that wouldn't button. I can work, she said, desperation cracking her voice. I can cook, clean, sew. I'll take any job you offer. Please, Mr. Ironstone, I'll do anything. He leaned back, chair creaking under his massive weight, and steepled his fingers. At $20 a month, you'd need more than 8 years to clear the debt. That's too long. I don't invest in bad risks. Her chest tightened. Then what do you expect me to do? His gaze didn't waver. Marry me, move into my house, share my name, share my bed for 5 years. At the end of those 5 years, your debt is cleared. You can walk away free. The room spun. Prue could hear her own heartbeat roaring in her ears, could almost hear the whispers that would race through town. The fattest girl in Silverton, bought like a bargain bride by the coldest man in 3 counties. You don't even like me, she whispered. This isn't about liking you, he replied, but for a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes, something hot and quickly buried. It's about what we both need. I need a wife on paper to keep this bank. You need a way to survive. He slid a contract across the polished wood, the nib of his pen pointing to the blank line where her name belonged. Outside, the wind howled against the window panes. Inside, Prue stared at the ink, at the promise of food and shelter, and the price of her freedom. Her hand shook as she reached for the pen, her entire life narrowing to a single stroke of black on white. Sign, Mrs. Ironstone, he said quietly, and your debt becomes mine. Her fingers closed around the pen. Prue signed her name with a trembling hand, sealing a future she barely understood. The pen left a trail of ink that looked too bold for her shaking fingers. When she finally set it down, Hezekiah Ironstone reached for the contract, folded it neatly, and slid it into a leather folder, as if this were any other business transaction. "Your belongings will be moved to my estate by nightfall," he said. "We marry in 3 days." 3 days. 3 days until she became Mrs. Ironstone, not out of love or choice, but necessity. The word wife felt foreign on her tongue, like a garment she wasn't meant to wear. "Why me?" she whispered. He paused at the door. "Because you're the only woman in this town who won't marry me for my fortune." And then he was gone. Prue stepped outside into the biting winter air, the snow crunching under her boots. Silverton's townsfolk went about their day, pushing carts of coal, leading horses through slush, shouting greetings across the street. But when they saw her, their steps slowed, their eyes narrowed, whispers trailing behind her like cruel shadows. "That's her, Prue Ashworth. The big one. What's she done now? Heard the banker bought her." "Bought? For what? Look at her." "Heard she's desperate. Desperate women do desperate things." Her cheeks burned hot, even in the freezing wind. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, wishing she could disappear into the snow. But disappearing wasn't an option. Not anymore. She had signed her life away. By the time she reached her small house on the edge of town, she was shaking, not from cold, but despair. Inside, the rooms were cramped and dim, the wallpaper peeling, the stove sputtering its last breath of heat. This had been her father's home, her mother's home, and now it would no longer be hers. She sank into the lone rocking chair, the wood protesting under her weight. She buried her hands in her face, letting the tears come. She cried for the debt she couldn't pay, for the life she was losing, for the life she was about to enter, for the man whose bed she was meant to share, whether he touched her or not. It was almost dark when a knock rattled the door. She jolted, wiping her eyes. Hezekiah Ironstone stood on her porch, flakes of snow clinging to his coat and hair. Even in the low lamplight, he filled the doorway like a storm cloud made of flesh and bone. "I came to check on you," he said. "You didn't need to," she whispered. "I know." A puff of white fog passed his lips as he exhaled. "I also brought dinner." He held out a basket. Inside were fresh rolls, a slab of salted beef, a wedge of cheese. Her stomach growled, humiliatingly loud. He pretended not to hear it. "Eat," he said. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" she asked bitterly. "Cleaning your mansion? Pretending to be a proper wife? Enduring the stares?" His eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "For surviving the next few weeks. People will talk. They always do." "I know." Her voice cracked. "They've talked my whole life." He hesitated, then stepped inside. The room suddenly felt too small for him, too small for his height, his presence, his quiet intensity. "How long has it been like this?" he asked, looking around the shabby home. "Since Mama died. Papa wasn't the same afterward. He stopped fixing things, stopped working as much. I did what I could, but—" She gestured at the fading wallpaper and sagging ceiling. "It's not much." He turned toward her slowly. "It's more than I had at your age." She blinked. "You? You own half the county." "I didn't always." There were stories about Hezekiah Ironstone, How he'd once lived in the mountains like a wild man, how he'd been found half-starved in a snowstorm 20 years ago, how he'd clawed his way to wealth through sheer will. But she'd never imagined him young, poor, or vulnerable. "I wasn't born into money," he said. "I built everything myself, starting with nothing but what fit in my pockets. I know what it is to lose everything." She swallowed hard. "Then why treat me like I'm just another asset?" He exhaled slowly. "Because if I let myself see you as more than that, this becomes something else, something dangerous." She frowned. "Dangerous?" He stepped closer. The floor creaked. She felt his heat even through the freezing air. "I need a wife in name only, a partner on paper, not feelings." His jaw tightened. "Feelings complicate everything." She looked away. "Don't worry, I won't fall in love with you." He hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. "Good." But his voice didn't sound relieved. Not at all. He left soon after, the cold swirling in behind him as the door closed. Prue stood there long after he disappeared into the night, clutching the basket of food. 3 days. 3 days until she became the wife of a man who saw her as a solution. Or so he claimed. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky as pale as bone and a wind that sliced through even the thickest coat. Prue stood in front of the mirror in her tiny bedroom, smoothing the plain white dress Hezekiah had bought for her. It fit perfectly. Too perfectly. She wondered if he had measured her just by looking. The thought sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Outside, a wagon creaked to a stop. Her heart lurched. It was time. When she stepped outside with her single suitcase, everything she owned in the world, the townspeople were already gathering like vultures. Whispers swirled through the cold air. "She's really marrying him? He must be desperate." Poor man. Poor woman. He could have chosen anyone. Why her? Why her indeed? Hezekiah descended from the wagon. He wore a long black coat that framed his massive frame and highlighted the streaks of silver in his hair. His expression was unreadable as he looked at her, neither disgusted nor approving, simply assessing, like a man inspecting a contract he'd already signed. "You ready?" he asked. "Yes." She forced the word out, though her throat was tight. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to guide her forward. The wedding was brief. A minister, 2 witnesses, vows spoken without warmth. A ring slipped onto her trembling finger, a kiss that was barely a brush of lips. If she hadn't been listening for it, she might have missed the sharp intake of breath he made when he stepped back. It wasn't disgust. It was something else, something she couldn't identify. But then it was done. Prudence Ashworth became Prudence Ironstone. No celebration followed, no meal, no dancing, no blessing from the town. People simply drifted away, disappointed that nothing scandalous had occurred. Hezekiah helped her into the wagon this time, surprising her with the gesture. When she sat, he draped a fur-lined blanket across her lap. "The mountain road will be cold," he said. "What about you?" she asked. He stepped up into the driver's seat, unfazed by the wind cutting across his face. "I don't feel the cold." She wasn't sure if he meant physically or emotionally. The horses began their climb toward the Ironstone estate, leaving Silverton and her old life behind. The mountain path was narrow and winding, edged by cliffs that plunged into shadowy forests. Snow clung to the pines in heavy, drooping sheets. The wind howled through the ravine like a living thing, but the blanket on her lap stayed warm. She peeked under it, a heated stone. He had thought ahead, of her comfort, of her warmth. Her chest tightened strangely. Hezekiah kept his eyes on the path, reins steady in his large hands. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before she finally spoke. "Do you truly not dislike how I look?" He didn't answer at first. His jaw worked, as though he were choosing words with care. "I don't choose a woman based on appearance," he said finally, "nor do I reject one for it. But the town talks, they say. I don't give a damn what the town says." His tone was sharp enough to make her jump. For a moment she thought she'd offended him. Then he continued, quieter this time. "You are practical, hard-working, unattached, intelligent, and strong enough to survive what's coming." "What's coming?" she echoed. He shook his head. "Nothing for you to worry about." But her stomach twisted. His secrets lurked like shadows between the trees. They reached a clearing 2 hours later. Prue gasped. The mansion rose from the mountainside like a dark fortress, 3 stories of carved stone and heavy timbers, tall windows framed by wrought iron. Smoke curled from the central chimney, and warm golden light glowed behind the thick glass. It looked old, ancient even, like something built not just for living, but for enduring. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's large," Hezekiah corrected. "More than one person can maintain alone." A strange way to describe one's home. He led her inside. The entry hall was vast, with a vaulted ceiling, a grand staircase, and floors polished enough to reflect the flicker of lanterns. Portraits lined the walls, stern men, unreadable women, all bearing some resemblance to him. "This is your home now," he said. "You'll learn its rooms in time." The echo of his voice filled the space, emphasizing its emptiness. He stopped at the foot of the staircase. "Your room is on the 2nd floor. Mine is on the 3rd. We keep separate quarters unless we have guests. Understood?" "Yes." "You are free to use the kitchen, the library, and the music room. The 3rd floor, however, is private." She swallowed. "I won't go there." "Good." The house groaned with old wood as he turned away, but Prue felt the weight of his presence even after he disappeared up the stairs. A moment later, she heard a door close softly above. Not slammed, not locked, closed, but not final. Prue explored the 2nd floor. Her bedroom was larger than her entire house in Silverton. A canopy bed, draped in burgundy velvet. A wardrobe filled with dresses that must have cost more than her father earned in a year. A fireside armchair with a quilt folded across it. She touched everything, disbelieving. He didn't have to do this. He could have given her a servant's room, a broom closet. Instead, he gave her comfort, care, respect. Why? No answer came. She opened the wardrobe and gasped again. The dresses came in her size, perfectly. No tugging, no squeezing, no shame. He had them made for her. Her eyes burned with sudden tears. In that moment, the mansion no longer felt cold or echoing. It felt like possibility, heavy with fear, yes, but also something warm, something unexpected rising quietly within her chest. Hope. But hope was dangerous, especially for a woman who was supposed to be a contract, not a wife. Prue woke the next morning to the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere in the hallway, and the faint scent of cedar smoke drifting in through the open doorway. The fire in her room was still burning low. Someone had tended it during the night. For a moment, she lay still, trying to make sense of the unfamiliar ceiling above her, the softness of the blankets, the vastness of the room. Then it all came back at once. The wedding, the contract, the mountain road, Hezekiah Ironstone, her husband. She dressed quickly, choosing the simplest of the new dresses, a dark blue wool gown that fit her curves perfectly without squeezing or pinching. She smoothed her hands nervously over the bodice, still marveling at the idea of having clothes that weren't second-hand or mended 50 times. The mansion was cold when she stepped into the hallway. The silence felt enormous, but not hollow. More like the house was waiting. She found the kitchen by following the warmth of the stove and the faint scent of coffee already brewing. The room was surprisingly cozy compared to the rest of the mansion, with a wide hearth, copper pans gleaming from hooks, and a wooden table worn smooth by years of use. A pot of water simmered on the stove. Hezekiah had been here before her. He rose early. She felt a little spark of determination. If she was going to play the role of wife, contracted or not, she would do it well. She pushed her sleeves up and began preparing breakfast. When he finally entered, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark waistcoat, she nearly dropped the ladle. Without his coat, his sheer size was even more intimidating. Broad shoulders, thick arms, a chest that looked carved from granite. His dark hair was slightly damp, as though he'd washed it in cold water. He paused in the doorway, studying her. "You're up early," he said. "I wanted to have breakfast ready for you." His gaze flicked from the table to her face. "You didn't need to do that." "I know," she said softly, "but I wanted to." Something in his jaw shifted, just slightly. "Thank you." He sat, unfolding his newspaper. Prue placed a plate before him. Fried eggs, ham, biscuits, and boiled potatoes. She hovered uncertainly. "Sit," he said, not looking up. "I can eat in the kitchen. We're married." His voice was firm. "Sit." She obeyed. They ate in silence except for the soft crunch of cutlery. When he finished, he wiped his mouth and finally met her gaze. "This is good," he said. Her breath caught. "Thank you." It was the first compliment he had ever given her. The days became a rhythm, slow, steady, the kind that soothed a wounded spirit. Prue cleaned the house from top to bottom. She laundered the linens, scrubbed the wide wooden floors until they shone, polished the brass fixtures, and aired out rooms that had not seen sunlight in months. She discovered small details that made her smile. A music box tucked into a dusty drawer, a collection of rare illustrated books in the library, a balcony overlooking the frozen valley. Every corner of the mansion carried a story she longed to know. Hezekiah, for his part, respected her space. He left for the bank at 7 each morning and returned just before dusk. In the evenings, he retired to his private floor without a word, but Prue noticed subtle changes. He paused when she laughed. He took longer finishing his dinner as though listening. He looked at her, not dismissively, not clinically, but with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. One evening, after the first snowfall that coated the world in sparkling white, he found her sweeping the front steps. She wore a scarf around her hair and gloves too thin for the cold. "You'll freeze," he said, stepping outside. "I'm almost done," she replied. "You don't need to sweep the snow. It looks nicer this way." "It doesn't matter how it looks," he said, his brow furrowing. "It matters to me." He stared at her a long moment before stepping closer, taking the broom from her hands and finishing the task himself. Prue watched the giant man clearing snow with surprising care. "You should be inside," he said without looking at her. "Why?" "Because you shouldn't be cold." He paused. "And because I said so." She smiled faintly. "You can't protect me from the weather." "I can try." The words were gruff, but something warm glowed beneath them. Days turned into weeks. The mountain snow grew deeper. Prue settled into her routines, and the mansion slowly transformed. Flowers appeared in vases, quilts brightened the gloomy hallways, the kitchen smelled of fresh bread and honey, the cold, echoing house felt alive again. One evening she was baking when she accidentally cut her finger. A small nick, nothing more, but it bled steadily. She wrapped a cloth around it and continued working. She didn't realize Hezekiah was home until she heard his heavy footsteps in the hall. He stopped short in the doorway, his eyes snapping to the blood on her hand. "What happened?" "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just a cut." "Let me see." She hesitated. His voice left no room for argument. She extended her hand. He took it gently, so gently it startled her. His thumb brushed the edge of the wound. "It's deeper than you think. It's fine, truly." "You live in my house," he said, his eyes flicking upward. "I take care of what's mine." The words sent a strange flutter through her chest. He cleaned the wound with surprising tenderness, wrapping her finger in clean gauze. His hands were massive, rough from years of mountain life, yet his touch was feather-light. "Thank you," she whispered. He held her gaze for a heartbeat too long before stepping back. "Don't cook tonight. I'll bring something from town." She blinked. "You don't need to." "I will." And he did. One snow-heavy afternoon, Prue discovered the music room. A grand piano dominated the space, its dark wood polished to a mirror shine. Her breath caught. She hadn't touched a piano since her father sold theirs to pay the doctor's bills. She sat and played. Her fingers trembled at first, rusty and uncertain, but soon the melody flowed, soft, wistful, echoing through the mansion like a long-forgotten memory. She didn't hear Hezekiah come home. She only turned when she felt him standing behind her. She jumped, startled. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude." "It's your house, too," he said. "I haven't played in years." It sounded... He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Peaceful." She blushed. "Thank you." "Play again." She did. And this time he stayed, silent, unmoving, listening as though the music held him captive. When she finished, she turned slightly. "Do you play?" "No." "Did your first wife?" He stiffened. She immediately regretted the question. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I shouldn't have asked." He cleared his throat. "She played. Not well." A pause. "But she loved it." Prue smiled gently. "Then I'm glad she had music." Hezekiah's jaw softened. "She did." Their eyes met, his guarded, hers warm, and something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but a thawing, a slow warming of cold iron. Late one evening, as Prue sat sewing in the parlor, Hezekiah descended from the third floor. She straightened instinctively. He rarely came down this late. He approached the fireplace, staring into the flames. "You've changed the house," he said without turning. "It feels different." "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "If you don't like—" "I like it." She froze. He finally turned, fixing her with that intense gray gaze. "It feels alive again." Her breath caught. "I'm glad." He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "You've done good work here." It was the highest praise he could give. She felt warmth bloom deep inside. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded stiffly, then turned as though to leave, but paused at the doorway. "Prue?" "Yes?" "Your presence makes this place less empty?" Her heart nearly stopped. "Mine, too." He didn't reply, but she saw his shoulders rise and fall with a slow, steady breath. And as he walked away, the house didn't feel cold at all. It felt like the start of something neither of them had expected. Winter deepened, wrapping Silverton in a relentless hush of snow and wind. Yet inside the once lifeless ironstone mansion, something new had taken root. Warmth, softness, a fragile hope that neither Prue nor Hezekiah dared name aloud. But hope, as always, drew shadows with it. The first crack in their quiet life came on a cold Thursday morning. Prue was sorting linens in the upstairs hallway when she overheard two townsmen speaking in low, conspiratorial tones outside the front door. She couldn't make out every word, but she heard enough to send a tremor through her chest. "You seen Ironstone lately?" "He's slipping. Should have handed the bank to the council." "And marrying her? A scheme, that's what it is." "She's after his fortune. Mark my words. She'll ruin him." Prue clutched a folded sheet to her chest, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She had known the town mocked her for her size her whole life, but now their ridicule stabbed deeper, because it touched him. Hezekiah didn't deserve to be dragged down because he married her out of necessity. She hurried downstairs to close the door before they said more, but when she reached it, she found Hezekiah already standing there, his tall silhouette rigid in the doorway. He had heard every word. The door shut with a slow, heavy thud. Prue braced herself for coldness, for the old Hezekiah, the man who hid behind walls and contracts. Instead, he turned to her, eyes burning with a fury that wasn't for her but for the world hurting her. "They know nothing," he growled, "and they don't matter." She swallowed. "But they're right about one thing." His frown darkened. "Which is?" "I don't belong in your world." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "People laugh at me behind your back. They think I'm not worthy to be your wife." "They don't get to decide your worth," he said thunderously. Her voice cracked. "Then why does it hurt so much?" He stepped closer, slow, cautious, as if approaching a deer on trembling legs. "Because you have a heart," he said quietly, "and because you care too much." Before she could answer, the front bell clanged harshly. Hezekiah's jaw tightened in warning. "Stay behind me." She obeyed. A man stood on the porch, a thin, sharp-faced stranger with a cruel smile and eyes like a starving wolf. Snow clung to his coat and boots, but the cold didn't touch him. Something else fueled him, something bitter. "Morning, Ironstone," the man drawled. "Long time." Prue felt the temperature in the hallway drop. Hezekiah knew him. "Marcus," he said, voice low, "I thought you left Colorado for good." "Thought I'd pay a friendly visit." Marcus leaned against the doorframe. "Word got around you married again. Quite the wife you chose." His gaze slid to Prue, slow, invasive, mocking. Hezekiah moved instantly, blocking the view of her with his enormous frame. "Mind your tongue." Marcus laughed, the sound like metal scraping against stone. "Seems you married her to keep your bank license. How noble." Prue's cheeks burned, but she didn't shrink. Not this time. Marcus's smile widened when he saw the flicker of defiance in her eyes. "Feisty, isn't she? Tell me, Ironstone, did you charge her interest for the privilege of sharing your bed?" Hezekiah lunged. Marcus jumped back, but not before Hezekiah's hand caught the front of his coat, slamming him against the porch rail. "You don't speak about her," Hezekiah snarled, voice vibrating with lethal promise. "Or what?" Marcus whispered, breath fogging in the cold. "You'll kill me, like you killed the last man who crossed you?" Hezekiah froze. Prue felt her heart stop. Marcus saw his advantage and smiled like a viper. "Oh, she doesn't know, does she? About the trapper in the Rockies you left buried under 8 feet of snow? Or about the U.S. Marshal, who came sniffing around afterward?" "Get out," Hezekiah said, voice hoarse. Marcus leaned in. "You have secrets, mountain man, and when they come to light, your bank, your reputation, your pretty little wife, they're all going to crumble." Hezekiah shoved him away with a strength born of barely contained violence. Marcus staggered, but stayed upright. "You can't hide forever, Ironstone. Your past is catching up." He walked away into the snow, his laughter trailing behind him like a curse. The door shut again. The house felt darker. Prue turned to Hezekiah, her voice barely a whisper. What did he mean about the man in the mountains? Hezekiah's chest rose and fell, every breath a battle. That was 20 years ago. It was self-defense, but the law never saw it that way. Marcus lied. He framed me, and by the time I cleared my name, Martha and the boys were dead. Pain flickered across his face, raw, unprotected. Prue touched his arm gently. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to look at me the way everyone else did, like I was a monster." Her heart clenched. "I could never see you that way." "You should." His voice cracked. "Marcus isn't the only enemy I have. There are others, people who would tear apart everything I've built and hurt anyone close to me." "Then let me help you." He looked staggered by the offer. "Help me?" "Yes." Her voice steadied. "I'm your wife. Maybe only by contract, but I take it seriously. If trouble comes, I won't run." The silence stretched. Then Hezekiah said something he had never said before. "I don't want you in danger." She stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. "Then trust me enough to let me stand beside you." His breath shuddered. In that moment, something in him shifted, some old rusted hinge inside his soul groaning open. "I'll tell you everything," he whispered. And he did. He told her about the betrayal that nearly killed him, the winter he'd been left to die in a snow cave, the year the law hunted him like an animal, how Martha's death destroyed what little humanity he had left. Prue listened, not with judgment, but with a quiet strength that steadied him. When he finished, he expected fear. Instead, she took his hand. "You survived all of it. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you a man worth fighting for." He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, softly, reverently. "Prue," he murmured, "you're not what I expected." She smiled faintly. "Neither are you." Their joined hands stayed clasped long after the fire in the hall burned low. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something braver than warmth took root. Something that might one day be strong enough to withstand whatever storm Marcus Grimshaw planned next. The storm came 3 nights later. The wind howled down from the mountains, rattling window panes and bending the pines until their trunks groaned. Snow slammed against the mansion in thick, heavy waves, turning the world outside into a swirling white void. Prue had just banked the fire in the parlor when she noticed the unease in Hezekiah's posture. He stood at the window, his massive frame rigid, his breath fogging the glass. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't turn. "Someone's out there." Her stomach tightened. "Marcus? or one of his men. Before she could reply, heavy fists pounded on the front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Prue froze. Hezekiah stepped in front of her immediately, his presence eclipsing everything else. "Get behind me," he said quietly. She obeyed without hesitation. The knocking came again, harder, more impatient. Hezekiah opened the door. Marcus Grimshaw stood on the porch, snow clinging to his coat, a pistol holstered at his side. Behind him were 2 other men, former trappers, rough and mean-looking, their faces half hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. "Evening, Ironstone," Marcus said with a grin far too calm for a man visiting in a blizzard. "Thought we'd stop by for a chat." "You're trespassing," Hezekiah said, blocking the doorway with his entire body. "This land isn't yours." Marcus shrugged. "The whole town's talking about your situation. A dangerous man with a brand-new wife. Rumor says she's worth $2,000 and a good deal more in scandal." Prue flinched. Hezekiah's jaw tightened. "Say her name, once, and see how fast you lose your teeth." Marcus smirked. "Let me in, Ironstone. I need to talk business." "No." Marcus leaned in, his smile turning something darker. "You owe me." "I owe you nothing." "You owe me your life," Marcus hissed. "I left you for dead once. I'm here to finish the job." The men behind him shifted, hands moving toward their holsters. Hezekiah's voice dropped to a warning growl. "You should walk away." Marcus's eyes flicked past Hezekiah and landed on Prue. "Or what? You'll shoot us in front of your innocent little wife?" Every instinct screamed at Prue to back away. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped forward, placing a hand on Hezekiah's arm. "Don't listen to him," she whispered. "He wants you angry. He wants you to make a mistake." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Well now, isn't that sweet? The fat wife thinks she can calm the beast." Hezekiah moved so fast the air seemed to crack. He slammed Marcus against the porch post, one forearm pressed to his throat. "You don't speak to her," he snarled. "Ever!" Marcus choked out a laugh. "I knew it. You're soft now. She made you soft." The 2 men behind Marcus raised their guns. Prue gasped. "Zeke!" In one motion, Hezekiah grabbed Marcus, yanked him forward, and spun, using Marcus's body as a shield. Gunfire exploded, deafening in the cold air. Marcus screamed as a bullet tore into his shoulder. "Drop your weapons!" Hezekiah thundered. The hired men hesitated, but when Marcus shrieked, "Kill him!" they raised their guns again. Hezekiah fired first. One man dropped, screaming and clutching his leg. The second fled into the blizzard, boots pounding through the snow. Marcus tried to crawl away, blood dripping from his wound, but Hezekiah stepped forward, towering over him like judgment itself. "You brought this to my door," Hezekiah said, voice low and steady. "You threatened my wife." Marcus spat blood into the snow. "She's not your wife. She's—" Hezekiah cut him off with a kick that sent Marcus sprawling. Prue rushed forward. "Zeke, stop! If you kill him, the law—" "He attacked us," Hezekiah said. "The law won't touch me." Marcus coughed, trembling. "You think they'll believe you? A mountain brute with a past, or me, a man with connections?" Hezekiah leaned down, his voice a razor. "I don't care who they believe. You won't hurt her again." Marcus's smirk faltered. For the first time, fear cracked through. Prue stepped beside her husband, placing a gentle hand on his back. "Zeke, look at me." He did. She held his gaze, soft but unyielding. "This isn't you, not anymore. Let the law handle him. Don't let him drag you back into the man you used to be." For a long moment, the only sound was the storm. Then, slowly, Hezekiah stepped back. Marcus collapsed into the snow, panting. Hezekiah lifted his rifle. For a terrifying second, Prue thought he'd changed his mind. Instead, he fired into the air. The echo boomed through the valley. "Sheriff's station is close enough," he said. "They'll hear it. They'll come." Marcus's eyes widened. "You'll regret this." Hezekiah stared him down. "Get off my land!" He dragged Marcus to his feet and shoved him off the porch. The man stumbled away, bleeding, disappearing into the swirling white. Silence fell. Then Hezekiah turned to Prue. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered. "You saved me." "No." His voice cracked. "You saved me." Snow drifted around them. The storm howled. But between them, a stillness bloomed, deep, warm, unshakable. For the first time, Hezekiah reached for her, not out of duty, not out of expectation, but out of need. "Prue," he said softly, "stay close tonight." "I will." He took her hand, rough palm enveloping her smaller fingers, and led her inside as the door closed against the storm. The mansion felt different after the gunshots faded into the distance. The storm still snarled outside, wind clawing at the walls like an animal desperate to get in. But inside, where the fire glowed and the lamps flickered, there was a fragile, trembling peace. Prue stood in the parlor, her breath shaky, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. She could feel the echo of danger in her bones. The image of Hezekiah throwing himself between her and 3 armed men replayed in her mind like a fever dream. Hezekiah shut the heavy front door and bolted it with a final decisive thud. Only when the lock clicked did he turn back to her. "Prue," he murmured, his voice low, rough, unsteady. "Come here." She went to him without hesitation. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his massive chest. He smelled of cold wind, gunpowder, and cedar, familiar, grounding, unbearably comforting. His heart pounded hard against her ear. "I could have lost you tonight," he whispered. "You didn't," she answered softly. "I'm right here." He held her tighter, as if afraid she might vanish. She had never seen him like this, shaken, vulnerable, human. This was the man he tried so hard to hide from the world, the man who feared losing love more than he feared bullets. "You didn't hesitate," she said quietly. "You stepped in front of me without thinking." "I didn't need to think," he replied. "You're my wife." The words settled between them like a vow spoken for the first time. She pulled back to look up at him. His eyes, gray, storm-bright, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm not going anywhere," Prue whispered, "even if the whole world comes for us." Hezekiah closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words eased a pain he carried for decades. When he opened them again, something had changed. The walls he had built around himself, stone upon stone, weren't just cracked. They were falling. "Let's go to the parlor," he said softly. "I want you beside me." They sat together on the rug before the fire, no distance, no formality, no contract between them. Just warmth, safety. 2 battered hearts learning how to beat in rhythm. Hezekiah draped a blanket over their legs, then took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in slow, reverent strokes. "You faced him with me," he murmured. "You didn't hide." "I couldn't leave you," she said. "I won't ever leave you." He exhaled a long, shuddering breath. "If something happened to you, Prue, I don't know what I'd become." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Something good," she whispered. "You'd become something good, because that's what you already are." He turned and kiss the top of her head, a tender, lingering kiss filled with gratitude and awe. The fire crackled. Snow drifted past the windows. The house, once cold and echoing, felt alive. "You're safe here," Hezekiah whispered, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. "As long as I breathe, this is your home." Her eyes filled with quiet, grateful tears. "And as long as I breathe," she said, voice breaking, "I'll stay." Outside, the storm raged on, but in the heart of the mansion, wrapped in each other's arms, they were untouched, two souls finding shelter in one another. Every time you press play on one of these stories, I'm reminded of how far a voice can travel, across mountains, across oceans, across nights, when you feel alone. Thank you for sitting with Prue and Hezekiah tonight, two broken people who found something whole in each other. If you're listening from a quiet room, from a crowded city, from a faraway country, tell me where you are. Your comments aren't just words, they're reminders that love, unexpected, imperfect, breathtaking love, still matters. And if you still believe in it, don't go anywhere. The next story is already waiting for you.